Some memories from 1970s Britain don't return as pictures so much as sounds. A hum from the street at 6 in the morning, a jingle round the corner, a crackle from the telly before anything has even started. The decade was full of noises like that, not just records or pop songs, but everyday sounds so ordinary you never gave them a second thought. This piece listens to the ones that still hit you hardest. Before a program began, there was this soft, floating music over an illustrated card showing a girl, a clown, and a game of noughts and crosses that never got finished. The BBC test card. It played for hours at a stretch, sometimes all morning and into the afternoon. The music was recorded abroad, and you couldn't buy any of it in the shops. It was strange, gentle stuff, sometimes relaxing, sometimes a little eerie. No other country built a following around their off-air music. Britain did. There's even a whole society dedicated to it, the Test Card Circle, people who collect and trade recordings like rare stamps. You'd know the milk float was coming before you opened your eyes, that low, whirring electric hum drifting down the street before 6 in the morning, and underneath it, the clink of glass pint bottles rattling in metal crates. You heard it from bed, half asleep, and you knew without looking that the milkman was out there. At their peak, there were over 50,000 electric milk floats on British roads. By the time you came downstairs, the bottles were on the step, foil tops already pecked by the birds. 3 notes of the Doctor Who theme were enough for every child in Britain to know exactly what was coming. Created in 1963 by Dahlia Derbyshire at the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, it was described as the first fully electronic television theme ever made. No instruments, no orchestra, oscillators, a plucked steel string, and hundreds of pieces of magnetic tape cut by hand and spliced together, note by note. By the 1970s, through the Pertwee and Tom Baker years, that eerie electronic sound meant one thing: Saturday tea time and a decision to make: watch from the sofa or watch from behind it. The Daleks were bad enough. The Cybermen were worse. That theme began before you even saw cushions, peered through their fingers. Some household sounds only mattered if someone in your house owned them, but if they did, you never forgot them. The trim phone began with a rising electronic warble, starting quiet and getting louder with every ring. Nothing like the standard GPO double ring most homes had. It looked like the phone of the future, smooth, a dial that glowed in the dark. It came out in the mid-1960s and could be rented from the GPO at extra cost, so not everyone had one. If your posh auntie had a trim phone, you remember. If your neighbor 2 doors down had one, you knew. You could hear it through the walls. It always sounded special, like something from a science fiction film that had landed in an ordinary living room. Nothing else on Earth sounded like a space hopper hitting tarmac. That deep, rubbery thud. The big orange ball with a painted face and 2 rubber horns to hold on to. You sat on it, gripped the horns, and bounced and bounced. Every kid on the street had one. After 10 bounces, you were knackered, thighs burning, but you kept going. Now think of a Friday evening, a knock at the front door. Your mom answers, a man's voice. Evening, love, pool's money. The pool's collector came every Friday without fail to collect for the football pool coupon. Little Woods, Vernon's, Zeta's. You heard the rustle of the coupon, the clink of coins, and a quick exchange on the doorstep. Your dad had already filled it in. This was the week. It never was, but that knock on a Friday evening was as much part of the week as the chip shop or the bath. Gradually it stopped. It simply disappeared, until I say it now and you realize you'd forgotten it ever existed. Friday afternoon, home from school, BBC One on. But it's Friday. It's 5 o'clock. It's Cracker Jack. The host says it, and the studio audience of children screams the word back in perfect unison. Cracker Jack. You did it too, on the living room floor, shouting at the television as if your life depended on it. It was automatic. Hundreds of kids in the studio, millions more at home joining in. A single communal shout that marked the end of the week. If someone said Cracker Jack to you in the street, you answered back, louder. That was the rule. Every child who owned a rally chopper knew the sound. The click-clunk of the gear lever between your knees, more car than bicycle, and then the tick-tick-tick as you coasted with your feet off the pedals. Over 1.5 million were sold in the UK through the 70s. It came with high-rise handlebars, a long padded seat with a backrest, and a big fat rear wheel that made you feel like you were riding a motorbike. If you wanted full effect, you pegged playing cards to the spokes with clothes pegs. The faster you went, the louder it got. Half the boys in Britain rode around like that, convinced they sounded like a real engine. Move to public places, and you heard a different, institutional noise, the tannoy, that crackle, pop, and hiss as the system sparked into life, then a voice, slightly muffled, echoing off tiles or a high ceiling. Would all swimmers please vacate the pool? Every swimming baths, every Butlin's holiday camp, every department store, the high street, and the football ground had one. The brand name became the word itself. Nobody said public address. They said tannoy. In the baths, that crackle usually meant your time was up. You had about 3 seconds between the spark and the instruction to get out. And then the ice cream van. Greensleeves, heard 3 streets away, slightly off key, closing in. Your legs started before your brain did. You burst through the back door, hands rummaging pockets and sofa cushions for cash, a 99 with a flake, a Zoom, an orange Mivy, anything you could afford. If you didn't get there in time, the van moved on. There was no second chance. At early 70s football matches, you heard something that no longer exists. Thousands of wooden rattles swung overhead on packed standing terraces, a steady clack, clack, clack whenever your team attacked. Every supporter seemed to have one. You spun it above your head when a goal went in, or simply because everyone else was doing it. As hooliganism rose, they were banned from most major grounds during the 70s, the rattles recast as potential weapons. When they disappeared, something about the atmosphere at football changed for good, replaced by chanting, by scarves, by drums, but nothing quite sounded the same. Another street character, the rag and battered flatbed truck. You dragged out old return, took a balloon or a goldfish in a plastic bag that rarely lasted the week. He came every week in most areas, right through the 70s. Some families kept a pile by the back door just for him. Then he was gone. A few lingered into the 80s, but the scrap trade moved on and the councils took over. A whole strand of street life quietly disappeared. There were more private sounds too. The quiet thunk as the needle hit the outer groove, the soft pop and hiss before the music started. You slid the LP from its sleeve, blew the dust off, lowered the arm, and waited. Those 2 or 3 seconds of crackle before the first note, to Bowie, to T-Rex, to Slade, meant every record had its own weather, its own pattern of pops and clicks, and then adverts that folded into everyday speech. Then they smashed them all too, bitch. They are clearly a most primitive people. The Smash Martians laugh, tin robots mocking humans for peeling potatoes, was everywhere after those adverts began in 1974. You mimicked that laugh at school, at the dinner table. It made instant mashed potato feel faintly futuristic. The 6 pips every hour on BBC Radio, the Greenwich Time